I suffered some pretty severe brain damage and I suffered a stroke when I was 25. I'm now a person with disability, and one of the most outwardly obvious impacts of that is that I've almost entirely lost my short-term memory. I feel really fortunate to be an Australian bloke who's seen the world through a myriad of different lenses that most people don't get the chance to see it through. Maybe I should have done something more aggressive and more competitive and dug my heels in a bit more. When I started my podcast, Everyday Greatness, about 10 years ago, I wanted to interview people who I thought were successful, and I wanted to find out what they had so I could put it in my back pocket and be successful as well. I want to get married in the Coptic church. That means a lot to my wife. So I told the priest I'd get baptized. Everything you need to be the person you want to be is inside you right now.
Every day, we're here for you. We get things off the ground, keeping you connected. We're here keeping you safe and secure. We keep things running smoothly and know the importance of giving back. Every day, we're here. ARA, here for you, here for good.
It is my pleasure to introduce the person who has brought this event and the Everyday Greatness podcast to life, Barnaby, who is a resilient speaker, podcast host, and a storyteller whose work centers on very one simple but powerful idea, the idea that leadership is not reserved for extraordinary moments, but is often found in the way that ordinary people show up for others in everyday life. Through Everyday Greatness, Barnaby creates a space for honest conversations around service, character, and the quiet strength that holds communities together, particularly in the face of adversity. His perspective is shaped not just by the people that he interviews.
Thank you all. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexia Palia. I think Alexia was a bit too humble. Alexia, as well as being one of the great MCs in Australia and a medical student at the University of Wollongong, that book that Alexia randomly mentioned is actually an Amazon bestseller, My Strong Heart. And Alexia was the 2023 Young Citizen of the Year, 2024 Young Sydney Sider of the Year, and Alexia runs schools programs where she teaches young Australian kids how to keep a healthy heart. So Alexia has done incredible things in her personal and professional life, but I don't think Alexia realizes she's actually helped create the vibe that I was hoping to get across in this room today. By accepting my invitation to MC today, Alexia and I have only met in person for the first time today. But when I texted her and said, would you MC the day for me? She said, I'll have to take the day off work, but I believe in what you're doing, so I'd love to, sure. And that really summed up to me the beauty of Australian generosity. Just when you believe in something, you just roll your sleeves up, jump in and lend a hand as best you can. So Alexia, thank you so much for doing this, and you're doing a sensational job as MC. Now, let's get this show on the road. Actually, no, before I get this show on the road, I need to warn you guys about something that could make this entire day look really awkward. I suffered some pretty severe brain damage when I suffered a stroke when I was 25. I'm now a person with disability, and one of the most outwardly obvious impacts of that is that I've almost entirely lost my short-term memory. So I have a huge over-reliance on my notes, and every now and then I might completely freeze and look like a deer in the headlights up here if I forget where I am. If that happens, just talk amongst yourselves for a second while I go back over my notes, find where I am. I'll carry on, and she'll be apples. Right, let's get this show on the road. There goes the memory straight away. I feel really fortunate to be an Australian bloke who's seen the world through a myriad of different lenses that most people don't get the chance to see it through. And they've taught me some deep and really important lessons why the world we all share is so incredible. And I want to pass on some of those lessons to you guys today, because one of the most important things I've learned is that there's so much wisdom out there, often in really unexpected places. And to receive that wisdom, you just need to open your hearts and your minds and share stories with as many people as you can. And you might be surprised at the wisdom you find. Some of the best wisdom you get is often in really unexpected places and isn't directed straight to you. Some of the best things I ever heard, I just overheard other people telling other people. My neighbour's dad used to tell her when she was growing up that one of the most important things she needed to know in life is to just work hard and be good to people. One of my great footy coaches used to say, focus on the game plan, the result will take care of itself. And my parents would always say to my sister that all she needs to know in life is just to plant seeds of small goodness everywhere you walk and have faith things will work out. So let me tell you about those lenses I've seen the world through. When I was 14, I was diagnosed with diabetes. When I was 17, I was named as school captain at my high school. When I was 18, I played a year in the AFL for the Sydney Swans. I was dropped after that 1 year, but when I was 19, I moved to Melbourne, did a pre-season with the Melbourne Demons under future Australian of the Year Neil Danaher and future Brisbane Lions Premiership coach Chris Fagan. I didn't get signed by Melbourne, but I played 2 years in the VFL for Sandringham. At the end of those 2 years, I hadn't even come close to gaining the attention of any AFL clubs. So I moved back to Sydney and resumed my career for my local footy club, the Pennant Hills Demons. But when I was on 96 games, I was the club captain and our team was undefeated halfway through the year. I was bashed in an alcohol-fueled gang attack and had a stroke. This was back in 2005 when disability support was nowhere near what it is today. So I was going to have to navigate this totally foreign landscape completely on my own. I was really fortunate to get a job at the ABC, doing auto cue at ABC News. I'd been studying journalism at university, and when I had my stroke, I was one subject away from finishing. So when I got back on my feet, I went and graduated, finished that last subject, and graduated with a diploma in journalism. I applied for jobs at 7, 9, 10, all the commercial networks, but because disability employment wasn't really a thing back then, most of them just said, no, too hard basket, and didn't even give me a shot. But the guy I applied for work with at the ABC was a huge Sydney Swans fan. So he said, yeah, come on in for an interview, no drama. So I went and did the interview. Part of the interview was doing a current affairs quiz. And he called me into his office after I'd taken it. He said, pass mark at the ABC for that quiz is 75%. You got 40%. I can't give you a job. So I went home with my tail between my legs, thinking I'd have to go and stock shelves at the local supermarket. But the same guy rang the next day and said, we've got a job in auto cue. Do you want that? And I jumped at the chance, thinking I'd get into the bottom floor, climb the ladder and become someone at the ABC. I had a few interviews internally, but I couldn't convince these total strangers about the value I could bring to a role because I just wasn't sure who I was myself at the time. So I started a small business as a sole trader, doing keynote speaking, resilience coaching, and later podcast hosting. And I still haven't helped my short-term memory. I worked really hard during my stroke rehab, and I ended up making an AFL comeback to play my 100th game at Pennant Hills. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and walked the Kokoda track. But one of the most challenging lenses I faced was when I lost my first wife to breast cancer. But that was also one of the most beautiful lenses I've seen the world through. Angela spent a week at Chris O'Brien Lifehouse under their holistic, patient-centered care model. And when she went in there, it was a really uncertain time in her cancer journey. And she looked terrified. The look in her eyes, helplessly out of strength, and had no idea if she was going to make it on her own anymore. But after just 1 week in Lifehouse, where people treated her like a human being, including Gail and Lorraine, and asked her how her mum was, talked about the weather, where'd you get your clothes, she walked out looking strong as a lion. And from that point in my life, good things just kept on happening. One of the lenses I'm the most proud of these days is as the husband of Julia, the father of 18-year-old Imogen, and father of our beautiful and loyal puppy dog, Walter. One of my favorite things to do these days is sit on our front porch and just shoot the breeze, talk about school, weather, or funny things that happened at the shops. Quite often doubted myself when I was younger, and especially during Angela's cancer journey. If the work hard, be good to people equation, I used to think that was mutually exclusive and you had to choose one or the other. And I'd chosen be good to people. And I thought maybe I've been a bit soft in life. Maybe I needed to be more firm, dig my heels in, stand up for myself more. But all these good things just keep on happening. When I started my podcast, Everyday Greatness, about 10 years ago, it was actually a really selfish reason for starting it. I wanted to interview people who I thought were successful and looked like they had something different. And I wanted to find out what they had so I could put it in my back pocket and be successful as well. But most of the people I've spoken to are just good, solid human beings. They don't want the limelight. They don't care about the fame and the fortune. They just want to be good to people and have faith things will work out. I have had no agenda with the people I try and get on and the conversations I try and have. And this resulted in a couple of years ago, the Governor General of Australia came up to me at an event we were both at and said, I want you to interview me on your podcast. I just laughed and said, yeah, that'd be cool, but you're a bit busy these days. She said, no, I'll make it happen. We'll do it at Admiralty House. So this is the Governor General of Australia on the Everyday Greatness podcast, sitting at the dining table where King Charles and Queen Camilla had dined literally weeks before. It gives me the greatest privilege and honour of my life to say that the Governor General of Australia, Her Excellency Sam Mostyn, joins me now on Everyday Greatness. Sam, thank you and welcome, and thank you for inviting us into your home.
Well, Barnaby, there's no one I'd rather have here at Kirribilli on Camaragal land, as you've already acknowledged, than you, given everything you've done over the last 10 years of your podcast on Everyday Greatness. And the joy and privilege is really all mine, because you're one of the people, I think, who exercises care and kindness and generosity and respect wherever you go.
My mother used to tell me that when you're having a conversation with a person, you should never start with an agenda. Never look at that person and think, right, I know what I'm going to get out of this person. Just talk to people. She said, everybody's got a spark. Everybody has some topic in their head that if you can tick it over, if you can get onto the subject, they'll just light up and they'll talk to you like mouthful of marbles underwater. I had no idea if this was going to work or not, but I've just kept on trying to do that my whole life. And it resulted in some really interesting moments. Like when I gave Gail O'Brien $5 with no pants on. I used to host an event called Give It a Crack, held at the Sydney Comedy Store, where people who had never tried stand-up comedy would get up and just give it a crack, having no idea if they're going to be any good or not. It was a fundraiser for Chris O'Brien Lifehouse. And Gail got on stage and I started the fundraising with some money that my nephew had given me. This clip's pretty funny, but the conversation I had with Gail halfway through this night was incredible. But watch the clip first. Welcome. Yeah, this is a non-pant area, Gail. I want to start the fundraising to Lifehouse. On Easter Sunday this year, I was at my sister's house for lunch, and my 5-year-old nephew came up to me and he said, Uncle Barnes, I want you to give this to Lifehouse so they can look after people like Ange. And I said, oh, mate, that's beautiful. So Gail from AJ Howarth, there's $5 they can look after people like Ange. So when you share stories with people, you sometimes have no idea the impact you might be having on them. And that sounds kind of weird, given I just gave Gail O'Brien $5 with no pants on. But when the night started, Gail came up to me and said, I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to leave early because I've got an international flight in the morning. And I said, yeah, no drama, that's fine. And anyway, so I performed stand-up comedy with no pants on, gave Gail $5. Then halfway through the night, she came up to me and said, I'm sorry, I've got to go. I said, yeah, that's no problem. The comedy store where the event was is on the top floor of this building we're in. And I said, I'll walk you down to your car. So I walked Gail down about 3 flights of stairs, thinking it's no big deal, over the car park, and went back upstairs and carried on without a second thought. But I rang Lifehouse the next day just to finalise the fundraising stuff. And one of the girls said to me, what did you say to Gail last night? I thought, oh, I'm in trouble here. I shouldn't have given her $5 with no pants on. And I told her the story about the no pants thing. She goes, no, not that. Gail hasn't shut up about you walking her downstairs to her car. And I thought, that's exactly what my mum was saying. You don't have an agenda. You just talk to people out of the goodness of your heart. And sometimes people take more out of it than you realise. Speaking of Gail O'Brien, I've always admired humble people. People who just roll their sleeves up and do what needs to be done without a fuss. They just work hard and they're good to people. They try their hardest and are proud of themselves, whether they win, lose, or draw. So when I started my small business about 10 years ago, I tried to capture that philosophy in my business operations. My mission statement can be summed up on my business motto: be a good bloke. I don't want to make squillions of dollars from my business or become rich, famous, powerful, or influential. I just want to earn enough money to comfortably provide for my family, go on the odd holiday, and pay for the exact wedding my daughter wants when the time comes. I've often thought about my business. I've often doubted, like I had in my life, that maybe running a business with a humble message and humble operations was a bit soft in today's ruthlessly competitive world. Maybe I should have done something more aggressive and more competitive and dug my heels in a bit more. But through my business, I do things that I think really add value to people's worlds. I don't just get up here and talk because it might sell me a couple of books or, book me another speaking job. I think right now, I think this might be getting into a few of you guys and helping you with doubts you guys might have. So this is why I do it. And one of the testimonials I got that's probably equally as good as the one from the Governor General was a young kid at a Year 12 leadership group that I spoke at in Adelaide a couple of years ago. He ran up to me after I'd finished and he said, "Oh, Barnaby, thanks so much. That was awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks so much." I was like, "Yeah, no worries, mate. Just calm down." He said, "No, I saw you speak when I was in Year 9. I've done everything you said. And here I am as a Year 12 leader." This kid wasn't a school captain or a vice captain. He was a prefect. But the look of pride in his eyes was so inspiring that made me realize that that's exactly why I do what I do. And despite those doubts of doing things on my own and not being strong enough, I've since given speeches for Google, Nestle, ABC, Linfox, and the Sydney Swans. So I feel like I'm doing okay. It was about, actually, it was the same night I gave Gail $5 with no pants on that a guy came up to me at the end of Give It a Crack, and he was the owner and operator of a media production and streaming company, Look Studio Australia. And he said, "Do you want to host an interview show?" I said, "Oh, maybe. What's it about?" And he said, "That's entirely up to you. You do all the creative, get the guests and locations. I'll do all the filming and technical work." So I went away and created this show called Everyday Greatness, which, as I said, was really selfishly done. I wanted to find what great people had that the rest of us didn't, so that I could become great and successful myself. But to a person, literally to a person, when I've tried to find the mystical X factor people had that made them better than the rest of us, no one's got it. Tom Harley, one of the great AFL footballers and administrators in the AFL, he's now the chief operating officer of the AFL. He said, all of the successful people I've met are just good, solid people. They give and earn respect in equal measures. They are subservient to a greater cause, maybe their footy club, their family, or their business, but they're just good human beings. The major sponsor of Everyday Greatness, the ARA Group, posted profits for 21 years straight, and I interviewed the managing director. And I said, "So how do you describe yourself?" He said, "I like to think I'm a good bloke." I thought, that's incredible. I thought these great people had something the rest of us didn't. But the more I speak to them, the more I realize that we're all exactly the same. They just have an ability in sport or business or community leadership, whatever it is. They just have something inside them, but they just work hard. They're good to people. They roll their sleeves up and they do what needs to be done without a fuss. So that interview with the Governor General, that testimonial she gave me was one of the most humbling things I've ever heard. But it wasn't the best part of the day. When I was teeing up the interview time with Her Excellency's media team, the lady I was speaking to said, "We've got an extra half-hour window after the interview. Do you want to use it?" I said, "Yep. I want to turn the cameras off and sit on the veranda of Admiralty House with my wife, my daughter, and the Governor General and have a cup of tea." So we sat out there and had the most normal Australian conversation you could imagine. My daughter had just got her P's that morning and drove to Admiralty House. And Her Excellency just ignored my wife and I and was just asking my daughter, "How's your test? What car did you drive? How's your instructor?" And then she told us that when Albo's staying in Sydney at Kirribilli House, he brings Toto for a walk around the fence. And we asked her about security protocols if she wants to take her family out for dinner. That was one of the most humbling days of my entire life. I used to think that the work hard, be good to people equation was mutually exclusive. I thought you had to do one or the other. You couldn't do them both alongside each other. But in my season at the Sydney Swans, I realised not only could you do them both together, but if you got the balance perfectly, it's actually a competitive advantage in today's world. When I got down to pre-season training, the first thing that struck me or surprised me was just how gracious these people were. I was playing with legends of the AFL, Plugger Lockett, Paul Kelly, Paul Roos, Andrew Dunkley, Mark Bays. But every single one of them would sit and have a chat to you if you wanted to talk. And they were just normal blokes, just regular old school blokes that just happened to be really good at footy. And that surprised the hell out of me. And then the young blokes I was playing with were really good human beings as well. Some of them went on to become some of the greatest players in the history of the AFL. Adam Goods, Brett Kirk, Leo Barry, Jared Crouch, Ben Matthews. And it was those in the work hard, be good to people equation. It was the be good to people part that had more of an impact on my life than I ever would have imagined while I was making those friendships. When I was 25, I was bashed in an alcohol-fueled gang attack and had a stroke. So the week before the stroke, I was in the incident that I was bashed in. I was out with 3 mates, and on the way home, one of my mates didn't like the way a kid was looking at him when he walked out of a convenience store. So he went over and had an angry word, and things got out of hand really quickly. My mate threw his kid on the ground and started kicking him while he was down. I ran over and grabbed my mate, told him he was being a peanut, and dragged him back to where our other 2 mates were. But all of a sudden, we started getting, these 5 guys must have got on their phones and rung their mates, and we got chased down by a mob of 20 guys. One of my mates was coward punched from behind and then was kicked in the head while he was lying on the ground. I ran over and shoved the kickers off, and that's the last thing I remember. Apparently I got the same treatment. I was coward punched and then kicked in the head while I was out. I woke up a couple of minutes after the fight though, and my life carried on 100% normally for the next 7 days. Played a game of footy that weekend, went back to work the following Monday. But the whole time I'd been running around telling people how lucky we'd been, this mob didn't have weapons. Turns out I'd torn my basilar artery, which isn't a good artery to tear, incidentally. The basilar artery is a single artery that carries all the blood from your body up to your brain. So if that artery is even damaged, there's a 96% fatality rate, but mine was completely torn. My family and friends were told to come and say goodbye. They were all told if I did survive, I'd probably be a vegetable. Had I known how dire things were while I was out, I would have thought of something a little more profound to say when I woke up. When I opened my eyes, I saw that all my friends and family were around my hospital bed. Someone explained to me that I had a stroke on the Thursday. I'd been unconscious all weekend, and it was now Monday. My first thought was, bugger, I missed a game of footy on the weekend. So I looked around everybody, took a deep, dramatic breath. Some of them elbowed each other and said, "Shh, he's about to speak." And I said, "You we beaten all ashore?" Turns out we lost. I was spewing. Thankfully, over the next few days, though, the reality of my situation took hold, and things didn't look good. Essentially, what the stroke did was that it wiped clear all the signals I'd built up, from my brain to the left side of my body. So I was going to have to relearn how to use my left side again, like a newborn baby. It was a long, daunting, and frustrating path, but as I was saying to Daniel as well, my stroke brethren, you just got to keep doing it. You just got to keep rolling your sleeves up. When it feels like a waste of time, that's when you got to double down and do it harder, and just keep doing it over and over and over again if you know it's the right thing to do. So the wisdom that came back to me more than I realised was from my old footy teammates. I played a few games in 1999 with Jude Bolton, who went on to become one of only 5 Sydney Swans to win 2 premierships with the club. He was on my first episode of Everyday Greatness. He talked to me about the Bloods culture that had started at the Sydney Swans officially in 2003. But it was the young kids that I played with who were Neville Nobodies who started the Bloods culture from 1998. And this is what Jude said about it.
Even that period where we weren't that successful, I remember feeling that we were bringing in external people to do inspiring talks and things like that. We're looking at a lot of external things, and in the end it is inside, and we knew we had a group that were willing to buy in and are really to drive each other. I don't think we had, even the best side going around, but we were the closest side and one that were willing to just give everything to each other. So we thrived on that. We wanted to make it the toughest place to play against and almost I guess we looked back as liked versus respected, and you don't have to like everyone that you're playing with, but you have to be respected. And
I think that's one of the great lines in world history. You don't have to like everybody you play with or you coexist with, but you have to respect them. I wasn't best mates with any one of those blokes at the Swans when I played one season in 1998. We're just good, solid friends. We'd say good day if we saw each other in change rooms. We'd have a look out for each other on the field, or if we saw each other in town, we'd have a chat. We'd look after each other. But we didn't have each other's phone numbers, didn't go out for beers or dinner with them or their families. But 7 years after I played at the Swans, those respectful relationships proved more valuable than I ever would have realised. This photo was taken in August 2005, a month after my stroke. All of my old teammates at the Swans heard that one of their old clubmates was down, so they dropped everything just to come in, get around me, pat me on the back, let me know they hoped everything was going okay. The very month after that photo was taken, September 2005, that very team won the Sydney Swans' first AFL premiership in 72 years, thanks largely to a mark the guy leaning on my wheelchair, Leo Barrick, took in the last quarter. So anybody who's unfortunate enough to have missed that game, as Paul Roux said, here it is.
Heads along the boundary line. Oh, good mark by Cox. Cox throws it onto the left. One last roll of the dice for the Eagles! Leo Barry, you star! Bob Murray, reincarnate. The longest premiership drought in football history is over. For the first time in 72 years, the Swans are champions of the AFL.
One of my greatest lessons came from one of my greatest challenges, seeing my late wife through her breast cancer journey to the day she passed away. When I was in my early 30s, I'd been doing all this stroke recovery and working really hard physically, which I was really proud of, but I was missing something, someone to share it all with. There was no one beside me. So I had to think about it and realised I've been so focused on what I was doing on myself, I wasn't worried about my personality and probably had a few rough edges and was probably a bit of a toolbox to be around. So I made a leap of faith and decided to knock off a few of those rough edges. And literally a couple of weeks later, I was introduced to Angela Gergis. And Angela and I shared a love that was so intense and so passionate, I wouldn't have believed it was true if I hadn't lived it myself. Angela and I met in August 2013. And from our very first date, we realised we're on the same page in a lot of those really important, intangible things in life. How close we were to our families, how we treated other people, and what we deemed to provide happiness. The longer we went on, the more we revealed about each other. Angela was a first-generation Australian Egyptian, and some of the things she revealed I found really odd. They were very deeply personal for her. So Angela told me she'd had breast cancer once before, and she'd been dating a dude from the church. And when she got home and told him, he said, "Oh, that's a bit heavy. I don't think I can deal with that," and split up with her. Then and there, just walked out. I thought that's so weird. But then Ange told me something else that I thought was even weirder. She said she didn't think her mother had the strength to cope with the news, so she didn't tell her mum she'd had breast cancer. She told her mum she got a job in Melbourne, moved down there and spent the year getting treatment for her cancer, including a mastectomy. And then when she was in remission, came home and just carried on as if nothing had happened. Well, that was really strange, but I was a little white Australian boy, so I didn't ask too many questions. One of the other things Andrew revealed was that she'd strayed from the flock when it came to her church, the Coptic Orthodox Church. And she said part of it was because she didn't want people to find out about her cancer and tell her mum because she'd be in trouble. So I said, well, that's easy. We just need to keep going back to church. So every Sunday we'd go down to the Coptic church and go to service. And one of the most beautiful parts about church was exactly what we're doing now, just sharing stories with people that care about what you're doing and what you're on about. I always found the church was like my old footy club, just a huge community of really good people that really cared about you and your family and what you were doing. And I always felt warm and well regarded and got to know the priests and the other parishioners really well. So the longer Angela and I went on, we started talking about what getting married might look like. We went and spoke to the priest of the Coptic church, he said, you both need to be Coptic to get married in the Coptic church. Angela's grandfather had helped build the church with his bare hands. So for me, it was a no-brainer. I was a non-practicing Anglican, but I thought I don't want to get married in a backyard or on a beach. I want to get married in the Coptic church. That means a lot to my wife. So I told the priest I'd get baptized, asked him how it was done, 3 separate Bible studies modules. Once you pass all those, then you get baptized. I thought, all right, cool, here we go. But then Angela broke a rib one afternoon, and that changed our lives forever. I left work and sent me a text and said, I've broken a bone, I'm in hospital, can you come in here and see me? I didn't think it was too much of drama. I just said, yeah, no worries. So when I got to the hospital, Angela's sister's mother-in-law met me at the front door. So I thought, oh, it can't be too bad if her mum's not here. But then when I got to Angela's room, she looked terrified. And I had no idea why she was so scared. It was just a broken bone. But I sat down on her bed. Ange told me she'd been diagnosed with breast cancer again. It was quite advanced. And that's the reason she'd broken her rib, shutting a gate in our apartment complex, because her bones had become weak. So I realized this was a really anxious time for Angela, especially given the last time she told her to do this and he just left her. So I said to her, look, everything's okay, everything's fine. I'm still here and I'm going to stick with you for the whole thing, and all the plans we had about getting married, your health permitting, are still on the cards. It seemed to relieve her somewhat. But then she told me something I couldn't understand it. I thought it must have been said because of a grief-stricken mindset. She said, we can't tell my mum. I'm an Australian bloke. Like, when bad things happen, your mum's the first person you tell. So I just couldn't comprehend how she was thinking this might be a good idea. So I thought, well, she's just been diagnosed with cancer. Now's not the time to protest it. So I just said, oh, look, we'll speak about it in a couple of days. So Ange seemed to be a bit relieved, a bit reassured that I wasn't going anywhere. But over the next few days and weeks, this chat about her telling her mother just wouldn't go away. I thought eventually she'd see the light and tell her, but she just wasn't individually. So I thought, oh, I've got to go and speak to her sister. We spoke to her sister and said, oh, Anne said this really silly thing that you're not going to tell your mum. She's like, no, she's right. We can't tell mum. It's like, whoa, that's so weird. But I thought, right, I've got to go higher. So I went to the priest of the church and said, oh, Father Matthew, the Ange and Christine don't want to tell their mum about her cancer. He said, no, it's fair enough. Like, she probably isn't strong enough to cope with it. I thought, this is just odd. Like, I didn't get it. And one day I said to Angela, you know, let's project forward and assume the worst case scenario. If you don't wake up one day, you know who your mum's coming looking for. So eventually she told her mum, and her mum acted like you'd expect a strong mother to act. She was emotional and sad and a bit teary when she found the news, but then she kicked into protective mother mode. She ran her baths, made her food, took her to appointments, everything you expect a strong mother to do. Over time, Angela's fear and that look of terror in her eyes started to dissipate to a certain extent, but every now and then it'd rear its ugly head. More than once, I came home from work and Angela met me at the front door and she just looked terrified, like she'd seen a ghost. I said, what's wrong? She said, I considered taking my own life today. It was only the thought of you coming home that helped me not do it. So I thought, this is really serious. I started doubting myself again that try and be a good person, look after the people around you stuff was strong enough. I thought, this is way deeper than that. This is way harder than that. I need something extra. But I didn't know what the extra was and I didn't know where to find it. So I just kept on reassuring her that, treating people well was going to be okay. We did eventually get married in the Coptic church. And you're talking about serendipity earlier, Alexia. One of the guys that played some music at our wedding and sang for us at our wedding was Emmanuel Kelly. Emmanuel just opened for Coldplay on their tour of Australia and New Zealand. And Emmanuel got a ticket for me and my daughter to go and watch them play. So that was serendipity more than I could have ever imagined. So Angela and I had this beautiful wedding and she seemed so happy. I remember a couple of times looking over at her standing there with her mother, just talking and laughing and smiling and having a great time. I thought, this is a beautiful moment in my life. Sad, tragic, big adversity, but it was beautiful to see my wife realize that the small, simple pleasures in life were enough to get you through. Every now and then, the look of fear still wasn't totally gone from her eyes, but it was after a short stay at Chris O'Brien Lifehouse that it totally disappeared. Angela was in a pretty uncertain time of her cancer journey, and she was checked into RPA. And I think the news she was getting was probably worse than people were letting on, because they just said to her, look, we can't deal with this, go to Chris O'Brien Lifehouse. So they transferred her over the road. And when we walked in, I remember looking in Angela's eyes, and she looked terrified again. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to provide the strength she needed. But after a week at Chris O'Brien Lifehouse, where people treated her like a human being, not a charity case, they talked to her, everybody talked to her, Lorraine, Gail, Juliet, all the staff, the nurses, the person on the reception desk, talked to her like a human being, asked about the weather, her clothes, asked how her family were. When we checked out after that week, where Angela got some pretty confronting news, I'll never forget it. We got out the glass doors, and she looked at me, and the look in her eyes just it inspired me. She looked strong as a lion. It was as if she was saying to me, I've got this. I've got no idea what's coming up, and I've got no idea how long I'm going to be here for, but you can stand down. I've got this. It's okay. And that's given me more comfort than anything else in my entire life. Now, being inside a church like this beautiful one, Mike, is probably a really good place to end with this story. On Easter Sunday, the year Angela was sick, I got a phone call from the priest of the church, the Coptic church, asking if I'd like to serve as a deacon on Easter Sunday. I had no idea how much of an honour it was to be asked by a priest to serve as a deacon. And in hindsight, I think it was a bit too casual. I just said, yeah, that sounds fun. I'll see you on Sunday, and hung up. I turned up to church on the holiest day in the Coptic calendar, looking like a European tourist. I was waving my GoPro about like it was nobody's business, wearing my Sydney Swan shirt. So for anybody who's ever wanted to see what happens behind the altar in the Coptic church on Easter Sunday, this is for you. There is so much good in today's world, so much wisdom from really unexpected places. So just keep your hearts and your minds open and share stories with as many people as you can, and have faith everything's going to work out. I want to thank you guys all for coming today. It's been a real privilege speaking to you all. I'm sure you've all seen smoother and more glamorous speaking presentations, but I hope you haven't seen more authentic, real and raw presentations. I don't do this to make money and become famous and powerful. I just do this because I think it's making a real difference in people's lives. But it does put bread on the table. So if I could ask you, if you think you know someone who might be interested in hearing this presentation, to take a photo of that slide, or I've got some flyers on the table at the front. If you could do that and pass it on, that'd be much appreciated. So I hope I've given you all at least a nugget of wisdom to walk away with. But if there's only one thing you walk away with, it's that I hope you guys realize that everything you need to be the person you want to be is inside you right now. Thank you so much. But this is Gail O'Brien. I interviewed Gail on season 1 of Everyday Greatness, and she actually told me on the interview exactly what I just told you, that everything you need to be the person you want to be is inside you right now. This is one of those moments of wisdom that I wasn't expecting. I was expecting a lot of wisdom from Gail O'Brien, but this just blew me away. So I hope you guys enjoy it.
Lifehouse as a facility has so many sad stories. Yeah. It is made up of sad stories.
Yes.
Why is there such a happy vibe in this place?
I think it's because Chris is here. I think it is a very positive place, despite the fact that, you know, a concentration of cancer means there's a concentration of grief. And after I leave you, I will go up to the wards and see some people who are really going through some really difficult times. But I know in my heart that they will get through it. We all get through it. It is something that concerns me if I wake up in the middle of the night. How is that family coping? But I know that they will get through it.
Now that is wisdom. Speaking of wisdom, I'd like to bring Alexia back. Thank you guys all for having me.
I don't think I need the microphone back either. I think my voice can definitely carry. I just wanted to say thank you so much for that. I think when you reached out to me in December to see if there was opportunity for us to work together, I knew little vignettes of your story, but I didn't know it to this extent. And I'm so happy that I've had the privilege to hear you speak and hear your journey. I think it was so clear that you spoke with such authenticity and integrity. And it's so rare that I think we're all truly inspired by that. The world is so populated, there's so many stories and things going out. So just to hear something that is so true and resonates deeply with everyone in the room, I think is, really, really special. So thank you for that. So I think at this point, we'd love just to invite everyone to take some tea, coffee, mingle, spend some time to just, we've been sitting for a while, stretch your leg, and then we'll come back and then go with the Everyday Greatness podcast. So thank you.
Every day, we're here for you. We get things off the ground, keeping you connected. We're here keeping you safe and secure. We keep things running smoothly and know the importance of giving back. Every day, we're here. ARA, here for you, here for good.